that a baby is a mammal. It is massively neurologically undeveloped. And so what is the natural state of sleep for a creature such as that? And it turns out that the natural state is that it will be waking up all the time. And all the time. And there are really good reasons for that. You're listening to the Science Baby podcast with me, Kim.
And me, Layla.
We're two nerdy mums who've researched the crap out of parenthood.
Seriously, you do not want to see our Google search histories.
Each episode, we chat about the why behind pregnancy, birth, and everything that comes after.
Because babies don't come with a manual, but with one born every minute, we reckon we can figure it out.
Hi.
Oh, hi, friend.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Feeling autumnal.
I know, all of a sudden it's changed, hasn't it?
It feels like spooky season, and I am here for it.
Are you a fan of spooky season?
I love spooky season.
Autumn is definitely my favourite season also. Here we are, again, one more week.
How are you?
I'm good. We've had a week of sickness.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was ill. I nearly lost my voice, which is great when you're having to shout and chase after a running toddler. So that was fun. And then we had some diarrhea from the toddler. Yeah, so that was fun. On top of potty training, so we've done a lot of... The washing machine's been busy.
Oh, how does potty training work when you have a diarrhea-covered child? Does it cease? Is it just survival mode?
There was a point in the day where I contemplated putting a nappy back on him, but there's so much psychology behind it. And he was recognising, that he was leaking into his pants. We just changed the pants. We kept him clean, and he was recognising that he needed to go to the loo. And so we were getting, we had the potty next to us at all times. So it was one of those days where you just have to abandon all perfection and just say, we're just going to get through this. But for the first 3 hours, we were out in a public toilet, which did have a potty, but it was one of those potties that tips and it just pours like a teapot that just drips down the back end.
That's nice.
And so I've spent most of the day cleaning public toilets, yeah.
Gosh,
so it was great, yeah.
I said motherhood is very glamorous and rewarding.
So glamorous. So other than that, yes, having a great time, enjoying the slightly cooler weather.
Yes, and everyone is out the other side, pooing normally.
I've got my voice back, which is fortuitous. I'm a little bit sad because today I'm wearing red because we were supposed to have a Wuthering Heights Day in the park next to where we live, and everybody was there was going to be hundreds of people dressed in red doing Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights dance, and they've cancelled it because of the wet grass.
It's health and safety gone mad.
It is health and safety gone mad.
Someone probably would have broken a hip, so it's probably for the best.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, it is a hill, so, I can imagine lots of Kate Bushes sliding down the hill, but yes, and I had just learnt the dance, so if you would like a rendition, it involves quite a lot of leg.
All dressed up and nowhere to go. I think for our, if we get people to pay us via Patreon, that needs to be some exclusive content.
100%. Absolutely. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to debase myself with a terrible rendition of Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights for the paying public.
It's not what I knew I needed today, but it's happening, and I want it.
How are you? How's your week been?
We've had a good week. We have not pooed into our car seat this week.
That is progress.
Oh, hang on. I'm a day out. We have pooed into our car seat once in the last 7 days.
Okay.
At the back end of last week, we had 2 quite serious incidents in the car seat. One involving the hose.
Oh dear.
And it was pretty grim. And then the second incident was more minor, but it was, again, in public. We were halfway to my parents', so we had to pull over into a service station and try our very best to sponge the car seat in a public car park and clean the child.
And clean the child, of course, yes.
Utterly covered. Everything's been thoroughly sterilised.
Was she as content the second time to be bathing in her own faeces?
She was having an excellent time. Yeah,
wonderful. I love that. Absolutely no social hang-ups whatsoever.
Do we need to be sad that there is a point in life where we become embarrassed at being covered in our own excrement? And what does that say about us as a society? Probably good things.
Did you know that pigs are very private and clean when it comes to their excrement.
I did not know.
Even wild pigs or pigs living out in the wild will find and choose a particular location in which to defecate, and they will keep that as their toilet area from choice.
Wowzers. I want to know how you know that.
We used to have pigs. As
Right.
I was growing up as a teenager, we rescued them from the chop house, 2 saddleback pigs, and they were about this big when we got them, and then they ended up the size of a sofa. And they broke out and gate crashed a vineyard with very posh restaurant, knocked an old woman to the ground, ran off down the road, and then got drunk on windfall apples.
Phenomenal. If you had asked me, if you'd said, hey Kim, guess what happened when I, Dr. Layla Basson, had pigs, that probably would have been pretty much what I expected to happen.
It does mean that whenever we go to a petting zoo with the child, I'm always way more excited than he is to see the animals, and specifically the pigs. I feel like I have a bond with them. Except for the last one we went to, the pigs were quite hungry, and so they definitely did want to eat my fingers. But
Right.
I was like, it's fine, I'm a pig whisperer. You can uncurl their tails. Do not uncurl the tails of unknown pigs. They're not big fans.
Do not uncurl the tails of unknown pigs. Right, sleep.
Sleep. Today we're going to talk about sleep. I guess this came up, didn't it? Because we were trying to find a time to actually sit down for an hour and record this podcast, and I realised how different our schedules are, and in a sense, sort of having a baby to me with a 2-year-old doesn't seem that far away, but so much has changed in the way of sleep and schedules and just everything that you just completely lose track of it. So I thought it would be a great place to start and talk about the thing that rules your life as a new parent: sleep.
And critically, the thing that you have the most conflicting sources of information for.
So much.
And of course, it's a very active area of research. So, the consensus is constantly being updated as well. But yeah, your current reality is my ambition, because we were trying to find a time to do this podcast, and I had to say, hey, Layla, I don't know, it depends when my child falls asleep. So we are currently 4.5 months into Stella's life, and her daytime naps are all over the place. We're working on it.
Give me a picture of what an actual 24-hour typically looks like in terms of nighttime, daytime sleeping.
So for Stella, she has always been relatively good at night. I think she is a baby who likes her sleep. She will be asleep by 8 p.m. at the moment. She will usually sleep till at least 3 a.m. Well, rather, I should say more precisely, I stay asleep until around 3 a.m. And she doesn't wake me up. But more typically around 5-ish. So we've had quite a good stint recently where she will kind of, quote unquote, sleep through the night, which means to us waking around 5-ish for a feed. And then I try and get her awake for the day at 7. Sort of, with half an eye on starting nursery in a few months, trying to establish a good wake time.
That is organised.
It's just the only thing I can control. And then she will have around 3 naps in the day. And again, we are just about starting to see the slightest suggestion of a little routine creeping in, which is why I even have a number in my head at all. But she normally goes about 2 hours wake window. So 2 hours is probably around typical for her age, 4.5 months. So I tend to just kind of look ahead in 2 hour chunks at the moment. And then she will still, because she's so little, she will sleep anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours in a single nap. So then I find myself towards the end of the day doing a bit of maths, thinking, right, if she needs a certain amount of sleep in the day, at the moment it's about 14 hours in total. In a 24-hour period, I'll kind of find myself doing a bit of maths to try and optimise her last nap before she then goes down. But again, it's a constant kind of iterative process because we can't rely on regular naps quite yet.
Yeah, it's interesting, that mum math. There was a time when I would try to do mum maths, but it's almost anti-logical, the sleep. He's gone through a phase. It's like there will be a day these days where he will not nap. And he is so tired. So I think he's going to go to sleep early. He doesn't go to sleep early. He keeps going. He will never go to sleep. This is the point. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't need sleep. This is it. He's just a robot. And then the next day you think, oh, he's going to be so overtired. No, we can go. We're just going to have our half-hour nap and then carry on. So I don't want to worry you, but there will probably be a time where that logic will completely fall apart. But yes, in theory, you sort of do tend to see the overall sleep over a 24-hour period decrease and it become more consolidated. So our experience was, obviously as a newborn, it's you know, your head's not in the game at all. So they're waking, they're sleeping. There's no concept of day or night for you or the baby. I mean, he could sleep 3-4 hours as a newborn through the night, and then it started to consolidate into bigger blocks. But I would say that our nighttime sleep is no better than yours is now, and quite often we do have a break in the middle of the night. He's always needed us for comfort in the night. So he tends to be one of these children that needs somebody there for comfort. It doesn't need much. He's not unhappy. He just kind of wants to know we're still there. So I now go into his room and give him a drink or just hold his hand, and then he'll go back to sleep again. Just now we're entering a very fun phase of imagination, which is great for daytime play, but it does mean that there's too much imagination at night. So when he wakes, he's imagining something that's scaring him and upsetting him more than he's ever been as a baby. So that was an unexpected change. It's nightmares. It's monsters under the bed. It's hidden things in the dark. He's asking for the light on quite a lot now. So yeah, that came earlier than I thought it would. But yeah, during the day, we definitely went from thinking about wake windows, where the time they were awake was the exception, to obviously discrete nap timings. We started with 3, we went down to 2, and that would be like, it could be 2 quite long ones, sort of like 2 hours, 2-hour naps, which was brilliant because you could get so much done. Then that started to slip into 1 nap, and going to nursery helped with that a lot because he goes to nursery for half a day, so we would get 1 nap in before or after nursery. And now that single nap is slipping down and diminishing, and we're looking at the horizon where that nap doesn't exist anymore. And as a parent, it's really tough because you don't get that time to yourself at all. Through the summer holidays, where we've had no groups on or anything, it's been all go from the moment he wakes up at 7 o'clock to the moment he goes to bed at summer hours, 10 o'clock. But it's hugely changeable, hugely changeable. And it's all biology, basically, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's before I became a parent, I didn't have enough appreciation for how neurologically immature babies are when they're born. They come out nowhere near as advanced. I hesitate to say ready for the world because they do survive, but they're nowhere near as advanced as any other mammal. They need around a year before they kind of get to the point where most mammals are just born. So, they've got a whole year outside the womb where they're just developing, whereas other mammals would be, still inside the womb, nice and safe, making all those connections in their brain and their nervous system. And so I guess one of the main motivations for this podcast was just to shine a light on how that inevitably impacts sleep and how that's not something to be afraid of, because it's just a part of how their brains work.
So in terms of biology, as adults, we get tired and fall asleep, and that typically happens at night time, doesn't it? And so, as I understand it, there's a couple of mechanisms that are driving that. So we've got something called sleep-wake homeostasis, or basically tiredness pressure. There comes a point where in your body, the longer you're awake, the greater the need to sleep. And that is just kind of a natural pressure in our bodies. Like, the longer you go without eating, the more hungry you become. Or the longer you go without drinking, the more thirsty you become. It's exactly the same thing. The longer you go without sleep, the more tired you're going to be. And the more likely it is you will fall asleep. So that's a homeostasis. It's the balance between sleep and wake. But then also we have circadian rhythms, sort of the day-night cycle, right? And those are governed by hormones in the body.
Yes, so essentially we secrete certain hormones that correspond to day and night. So we start secreting melatonin a certain amount of time before we fall asleep. And that basically tells the body, hey, your sleep pressure is high, you need to start feeling sleepy so you can rest. And then similarly, when we wake up in the morning, we secrete cortisol, which kind of jams us up a bit. And that follows a circadian rhythm which is governed internally with really, really, really primitive brain structures, which itself is modulated by the external daylight cycle. But of course, it takes a little while. If there's a sudden change in the daylight cycle, like when you're jet lagged, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to get its bearings again. And that makes it really easy for us to feel sleepy and feel wakeful. But babies just don't have that.
No, so they don't produce their own melatonin, do they, in the beginning?
Correct, yeah. So their whole system is kind of still coming online. So they essentially sleep for the same amount in the day and the night. They have no idea what time it is, which is really annoying.
It's quite freeing, really, isn't it?
Indeed. And my understanding is that, so this does naturally, start to happen. Their brain will start developing and their hormonal centres start developing so that they do start to secrete their cortisol and melatonin in sequence with the day and the night cycle. But we can help it by showing them daylight in the same way that we expose ourselves to daylight in order to catch up after we're jet lagged. Babies can be helped by the same thing. Obviously, we don't want to stick them in the sun because of UV safety, but that can help it to develop these external stimuli.
I think it would be a really interesting and completely illegal, immoral and awful experiment to actually see how a baby's sleep pattern would develop differently if they were never exposed to any day-night cycling.
Yes.
Like the baby in a box experiment.
There would be some questions.
There would be some questions, but I imagine that it really does have a big impact.
Yes, and it's something that in our research for this episode, it's not something I looked into, but that would be a really interesting question to look at is how much does daylight actually help their circadian rhythm develop, and does it bring it forward by a number of weeks, or is it just much for muchness? Again, probably an unethical thing to do.
I mean, certainly as a parent it helps. Like if you are in your house just under artificial light all day, which as a newborn parent, maybe one that's recovering from a traumatic birth or something like that, it is tempting to do because you don't feel capable of kind of going out and circulating with the rest of the world. But the more you regulate your own rhythm to that day and night, you do start to feel more human. I certainly did anyway. So you can feel it in yourself. And like you say, when you're trying to catch up from jet lag, it definitely works.
And like you say, it is the one thing that they may be denied because you are still recovering mentally and physically, and so you are still in your cave, which is totally fair enough. And so don't put too much pressure on yourself.
But just open the curtains, maybe.
Yes. So when I had Stella, I was recommended a fantastic book by an academic called Helen Ball, who is a sleep researcher and anthropologist. And that was the critical hook for me, because she's come at the subject from an anthropological point of view, where they recognise that a baby is a mammal. It is not just a mammal, but it is a mammal who is massively neurologically undeveloped. And so what is the natural state of sleep for a creature such as that? And it turns out that the natural state is that it will be waking up all the time. And all the time, and there are really good reasons for that. But I think the reason why anyone's talking about this at all, especially in the Western world, is that we are taught that babies should be sleeping through the night, and that a good baby will sleep through the night and not disturb you, which would be lovely, but unfortunately seems to be at odds with the natural biological state of these undeveloped mammal things. So I have found Helen Ball's book, How Babies Sleep, incredibly useful. We never want to declare absolute truth in science, so this is just one academic's or one team of academics' point of view. But there is a load of science in it. It's written for the layman, but of course it gives you all of these jumping off points into different, very good research studies that you can find out more about. So it's really great. And although the research group also runs a website called Basis, which is essentially a summary and one which can be constantly updated, of the state of the research as it stands. The way that Ball puts it is that there's this conflict between baby sleep and adult sleep, which I thought was a brilliant way to put it, because there is a conflict and it makes us feel as parents like there's something wrong. Because let's be honest, there is something wrong. We're not sleeping enough. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your baby. It just means that there is this temporary conflict between their sleep needs and your sleep needs. But the general message is not to worry about it too much. So essentially, there's a fundamental biological difference between baby sleep and adult sleep, and it equates to basically a difference in the types of sleep stages that we go through. So for adults, we go through sequential stages of light and deep sleep, which is kind of our restful phase. And then, as most of our audience will know, we then click into rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep, at some point, and that's where we do all of our dreaming, and that's when things get really weird. Don't think anyone really knows what goes on there. I'm not a sleep biologist, so
I don't know. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's unknowable. So yeah, things get really weird in REM sleep, and then we often will be quite easily wakeable, but then we'll kind of cycle throughout the night a number of sleep stages from light to deep, REM, and then it'll repeat throughout the night. Babies spend so much time in REM sleep, it's ridiculous. So for babies, it tends to be called active sleep. And for anyone who's ever shared a room with a newborn, they know exactly what we mean by that, because they are thrashing all around the place.
Making the strangest noises. Yeah.
100%. You're like, whoa, the baby's awake. It took me weeks to figure out the baby's not awake. She's just sleeping, but really loudly. So my understanding is that babies spend about 50% of their time in this active or REM stage of sleep. And that is a big difference to adults, which I think is around 20%. Whereas babies are like half the time in this active phase of sleep, which makes total sense because this active phase is where the brain is doing all its building. It's making neural connections. It's filing stuff away in the right place. It's doing all this really, really, really important development stuff. So babies have to spend a lot of time there because their brains are exploding. So there's this kind of thing with babies where they're kind of just rapidly going between REM, non-REM, REM, non-REM, or active, quiet, active, quiet.
And that non-REM sleep isn't like our light sleep. It's like they go deep into deep sleep, like a true rest stage, don't they? So we'll come on to this later. But that's kind of a bit of a danger zone, because it's almost where, the active sleep has been so busy and they're doing so much brain stuff, like so much filing, so much organising, that when they do go into the deep sleep, a lot of it shuts down more than it does in adults, or at least they spend longer in that deep sleep, and it can be quite disturbing as a parent to see it, because it's that constant, is my baby breathing? If they're not thrashing around, and there's that the rest of the time they are just so still, breathing so quietly. So that's different to us because we have that period of light sleep where we're easily wakeable. But there are times when a baby is in deep sleep, they will take some time to rouse, which can be quite scary as well.
It can be a scary time when, a creature as neurologically undeveloped as a baby spends this kind of extended period in very, very deep stasis almost. It can be very unsettling.
But that doesn't last forever, does it? So as they start to, the big word here is consolidate sleep.
Consolidate. What does this mean? This golden elixir of adult sleep.
When we went to our NCT classes, they showed us a pie chart of like, well, this is when you can expect your baby to be awake and asleep. And it's a pie chart literally sliced into about 40 different slices. And it's wake, feed, sleep, wake, feed, sleep, wake, feed, sleep. And then even over the course of the first 2 weeks that you've got your baby, those slices become fewer and they become larger. So you end up with a period of sleeping and a period of waking and feeding, and then a period of sleeping. And that's kind of where the idea of wake windows comes from. It's definitely more applicable once your child is starting to sleep for bigger chunks and to be awake for bigger chunks. And so with that sleep consolidation, they're actually pushing together different sleep cycles. And so the adult sleep cycle is the light, deep REM, as will last about 90 minutes, about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Whereas a baby's, because they haven't got that light section and because everything's moving so fast, their sleep cycle, their single cycle of deep and active, is only going to be 45 minutes. One of the reasons their sleep cycles are so short is because babies have got a more pressing priority than sleep, and that is food. So their stomachs are so small when they're born. They're literally the size of a marble. That stomach will continue to grow. I think they say, certainly when we came to weaning, they say their stomach is about the same size as their fist. So you think that doesn't take a lot of food and it empties pretty quickly. So they're going to be feeling hungry a lot more often than we are. And that is going to be a pressure. So you've got this sleep pressure going, oh, you know, I need to be sleeping, I'm really tired. But then the hunger will wake them up. And so as they grow, as they become larger, as their stomachs become larger, they are able to go longer without food. And that is playing a lot into that consolidation, for the tiredness pressure to be the thing that wins out over the hungerness pressure. Is that a word? Hungerness? Yeah.
It is now.
It is now, yeah.
For us parents as well, it feels like what it is, which is a fundamental biological tug of war between two basic needs, it's hunger and sleep. And often I think parents can feel like collateral in the middle of that war, can't they?
Oh, definitely.
I certainly have.
But as they consolidate sleep, they're starting to join together different sleep cycles.
There's lots of things going on in the first year of a baby's life. So one is that biologically their sleep cycles are maturing. So they're acquiring these more complex stages of sleep as their brain develops. But also they are potentially going to be able to settle themselves more. So we've got two things going on. One is that physically their sleep cycles are going to become longer as they mature, but also they may not need so much reassurance between those cycles if they are waking. For example, adults also very commonly wake between sleep cycles, but we don't necessarily need reassurance as soon as we wake up, so we can just check our surroundings, go, cool, there are no lions around, I'm going to go back to sleep.
And we don't even remember that, do we?
No.
No recollection of it. That's crazy.
So this is a process that's going on. This is part of their normal development. But of course, for each baby, each individual baby, and this is actually a really important message in Ball's research as well, is that you can look at the median of all of the data. Your baby's going to be nowhere near that median, you know, in all likelihood. You know, there's such a huge range of, just if you just start from the basic need for sleep in a 24-hour period, can range from something like 8 hours to like 20 hours. I'm paraphrasing. I'm sure there are more precise numbers, but it's something like that. That's the range. It's insane. And your baby can be very normal, very happy anywhere in that range.
And how they break it up within that range as well. So they might still want to nap every 2 hours, or they might want to go for a stretch of 5-7 hours without stopping. And this is definitely something I noticed as a parent to a growing child, with speaking to other parents and interacting with other parents and hearing their stories. It's one of the first places where you really learn, and I'm going to say this pretty much every episode, every child is different. And like, I cannot say it enough. Every child is different, and that is absolutely fine. Some kids get up and walk when they're 8 months old. Some kids are still sitting on their bum at 20. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily developmentally delayed, but we have a tendency to compare with other parents to check what we're doing is right or in the right ballpark. But there is only a limit to how far that comparison can take you, because like you say, there is such a big range in what is healthy and normal for a kid, because ultimately it comes down to their personality, their sleep personality, their eating personality, their moving personality. And, you know, you're handed a baby and it's got 2 of everything down the side and 1 down the middle, and you think, okay, well, everybody else is doing the same thing. But before long, and I think you're realising this already probably at 4 months, there are people who are having very different experiences with their babies. And all you can do is kind of say, that sounds tough.
Yeah. It's mad. You can have a perfectly normal conversation about babies that are very similar in ages. I had one the other day where I was saying that Stella will quite often sleep 7 hours stretch at night. And the person I was talking to said, I see every hour of the night. I'm awake. When I see every number on that clock. And it's insane to acknowledge that is totally normal and healthy for those two babies.
I bet that mother doesn't feel like it's very healthy.
No, and it's amazing. We'll come on to this. This is something we will cover in this podcast, is how the hell do you cope with that? Because most importantly, you need to be able to manage every day and get the amount of sleep that you need to survive.
I mean, we'll definitely get into it, but just be reassured that you're biologically reinforced to manage. It might feel like hell, and it definitely does feel like you're going out of your mind, but your body is doing its best to help you cope, because women have been doing this in one way or another for a million years.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that the research currently at the moment seems to suggest that as these changes are taking place and your child is consolidating beautifully and developing all these wonderful adult sleep cycles, that only happens when you expect it to happen for 1 in 3 babies.
Right.
The other 2/3 of babies are just happily waking up every 45 minutes and having a little chat with their mum or their dad, every hour of every night. So if your baby is, one of these unicorn babies who sleeps 12 hours from 6 weeks old, you're absolutely crack on, that's incredible, but you're in the minority. And so if you are one of these parents who is seeing every hour every night, you're in the majority. That is, most babies are still, for very good reason, waking up every however long. And we will do another podcast on this, the dreaded sleep regression, quote unquote, because another point which the data is showing over and over again is that if your kid starts consolidating in the night, that probably isn't going to be forever. They're going to go backwards and forwards as their brain does weird stuff, and it affects the architecture of their sleep. Am I right, Layla? My understanding is that's going to be changing for the first few years of a baby's life.
Yeah, I mean, it will change, and it's not a linear progression in terms of sleep. It's sort of linear, but it's one of these, you get an occasional bump in the road, but you need to reassure yourself that it's not forever. They will become an adult who can sleep through the night. One day there will be a teenager who you can't get up in the morning. You have that on your distant horizon, and maybe it'll help you get through it. Our adult sleep is already not quite as natural as it was even like 200 years ago, right? So what we are in right now is a kind of post-industrial sleep landscape. We go to bed in the mid-evening. It's been dark for a long time. We sleep through the night and we get up round about when the sun comes up-ish. As humans, that's not always been a natural way to sleep. Pre-industrial, pre-electric lighting, the pressures of a working day, people would go to bed much earlier because they had no light. It was dark, there's nothing to do, go to sleep. Had a busy day, go to sleep. They would typically wake in the middle of the night for a period of like 1, 2, up to 3 hours, maybe do some stuff, have sex. I've no idea what they were doing for that time, but they naturally would wake for a period and then have a second phase of sleeping. That, for the vast proportion of human history, has been the natural way for humans to sleep. So already we are in this kind of capitalist sleep regime.
Always comes back to capitalism.
Oh, capitalism! But it is that, because we are expected to get up and work and do a full day's work, unless you live in Spain where you get to have a siesta. But again, that's a culture that as adults are listening to their external environment better. But we in Western cultures typically are expected to get up and be awake and work all day and be super productive, which means that we're exhausted at the end of their day and we are sleeping all the way through. That tiredness pressure is pushing us all the way through. which I believe Ball's research has highlighted the conflict between that and the natural state of babies who've got no concept of the patriarchy. They have got no idea of the man.
Who is the man?
Who is the man?
Does he have milk?
Babies have got no concept of whether they don't have to do a whole day of work. And so I believe that's where a lot of our stress as parents comes from, is that conflict between what is expected of us in our culture and what our babies are expecting of us. And these babies are relying on us for their survival. So we are caught between being able to put food on the table and be able to care for this vulnerable creature that needs us. And that is super stressful.
Yeah, and it's brought into sharp contrast in cultures that are potentially even more capitalist than ours. You know, the United States, for example, where unfortunately maternity leave and postpartum support is potentially not there financially, and women are having to go back to work very, very early in their postpartum journey, 3-4 weeks sometimes. And that affects your daily rhythm, like you were saying, and that means you are exhausted at the end of a day, because you're having to be productive in society again, as well as keep this child alive, which is a job in itself. The demands, financial and industrial, that are put on us today are at odds with keeping a child alive and adhering to their rhythms, for sure.
But that doesn't have to be the case, though, because we're talking about Western countries and we're talking about the UK, Western Europe, the US. But in other rich countries, the culture is such that parents are not actually reporting sleep problems with their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Other societies that are not Western, but are still, developed, so people have jobs and they have the same expectations. There is not a cultural expectation for a child to sleep through the night. There is not a cultural expectation for a child to sleep independently. There are societies where we have parents co-sleeping with their children for a number of years. And in its own ways that can reduce the nighttime stresses and strains on the parents of when you bring in this need for frequent waking. There are ways to deal with it if you are not already stressed about the fact that your child is waking frequently.
I saw the statistics that contrasted Western culture, this very highly industrial Western culture where we expect independence from our newborn babies. Over tens of % of families reported sleep problems. Something like 30 to 50% of families reported so-called sleep problems with their baby. Whereas in countries like Japan and in Korea, where co-sleeping is much more common, almost ubiquitous, they're literally sleeping in the same bed, and there is a more relaxed maternal culture, only 3 to 5% of families reported sleep problems. So that is a huge difference. There was no difference between those babies. They were still waking as much, but it was completely how it was perceived by those individuals subject to those cultures. So I think that's a really, really striking difference just in sort of the expectations that you put on yourself.
It's amazing when you start to realise the expectations you have and the anxieties you have around your baby's sleep come from expectations that you were taught by your society and that actually may not be biologically sound. And I wonder how I would have experienced the first few weeks of Stella's life if I didn't expect that a child could, sleep through the night that young. And if I realised that actually this is just me for the night, I've got Netflix, and, we're going to have a great time together and I'm going to savour these times rather than be scared by them, every dusk as the sun starts going down.
Be terrified that it's going to be a terrible night and that will mean a terrible day, rather than just, like you say, relishing that time with your newborn, whatever sleep-wake shape that would take. So, of course, short of moving to Japan or Korea and completely upending your life and lifestyle, we can't escape from the fact that we are in this capitalist culture. There are expectations of us to, socialise, work. We do want to try and meet somewhere in the middle with our babies, don't we? And help to guide them towards a more consolidated sleep and a safe sleep, and one that's going to be safe for you as a parent. So the question is, what can we do about this conflict between baby and adult sleep?
I think the resounding message from everything we've learned is don't be afraid of it. So frequent waking is absolutely necessary, because babies simply can't stay asleep for very long. Their brains don't know how. And they need to feed so often, as you said. And research now suggests that that tendency to wake frequently is incredibly protective because of the neurological landscape of sleep. We now think that waking frequently can help protect the baby against sudden infant death, which is something, unfortunately, that does happen to some babies.
Yes, because there are some statistics that in that period of deep sleep where they are finally doing a really big rest, neurological rest, that is a period of risk for a newborn. I wouldn't say danger because it makes it sound like it's quite common. It is not common at all, but it is a risky time because their autonomic nervous system, their whole body is at rest in that kind of stasis period. That is the time that some of the SIDS cases have kicked in that deep sleep phase where they just stop breathing for no reason. So if you're trying to force them to sleep and doing things which are definitely not recommended, which is, things like covering them up, making them too warm, you are increasing the risk that they're going to be in deep sleep for a longer period of time and that they're not being subjected to that protective wake cycle. So as hard as it is on us parents, it really is the best thing to let their biology take its course.
And that seems to be what the science is telling us, and that is what the statistics are telling us as well. Mm-hmm. And also it's important to acknowledge that we know a lot more from psychologists now about attachment theory and how babies form attachments and learn their place in the world and become secure children. And what seems to be the case is that the more responsive you are to your baby, the more you respond to their cries in the middle of the night, even if it's every hour, the more secure they're going to be later on and the more independently they're going to be able to fall asleep and get themselves back to sleep during the night. So what is filtering through into a lot of new parent education now seems to be a total U-turn on the, cry themselves to sleep ethos, which again, culturally we've inherited from slightly more old-fashioned attitudes. But leaving babies to cry out seems to be derived from a lack of knowledge and understanding about how babies form attachment.
That's definitely at odds with things that our parents' generation tell us, that like, oh, well, if you go to them now, you're spoiling them, they'll always expect it. But that's completely at odds with what's being found.
I mean, that's not to say that if your child is crying in the back of the car and you're stuck in traffic and you can't get to them, that's not to say that you're damaging your child. It is, I think, a bit of a nail in the coffin, I hope, for this idea that you just leave a child all night to cry. Mm-hmm. And I hope that it allows this generation of new parents to give themselves permission to respond to their children, because I think often your instincts are crying out for you to respond to your children. It's a really tricky territory to wade into, isn't it, this? Because it's incredibly emotive. And I think one thing we need to acknowledge is also that the sleep problem industry is a lucrative one. So there's that whole,
I suppose the message is, be responsive to your baby, be kind to yourself as far as possible within the limits of your lifestyle and the expectations that are unavoidably put on you. Be kind to yourself and don't assume that your baby has a problem just because they're waking in the night. They're doing what they need to as you said, a small, underdeveloped mammal. And for a while, your job has to be to just be there for them. And it's hard. I think we can take steps to make it easier on ourselves. Surround yourself with your people, with your support structure as far as possible. whether that's a partner, grandparents, friends. This is not a time to be fiercely independent. It's a time to accept that the stresses on you as an adult human being are greater than they probably have been at other times in your life. And that is what the village used to be for. And we need to cobble together the semblance of a village from what we have these days. And it's important to recognize a lot of people don't have anything that looks like a village anymore. But reach out for help and accept it. That was something I was not very good at doing.
In the same way as, we know that attitudes towards baby sleep is different cross-culturally, we know that parental support and that village looks very different across cultures as well. And that has a stark effect on the mother's mental health in the first year. And so the more support you can cobble together, the better.
And make choices that are right for you and your family as well. So things like where the baby sleeps. So within the last 2 years, the NHS have actually updated their guidance on co-sleeping. So when Felix was first born, co-sleeping was a no-no. Don't co-sleep, they said. It's dangerous. It increases the risk of SIDS and positional asphyxiation, babies dying for really tragic reasons. And now they've dived into the statistics. What they're finding is that it's not the act of co-sleeping itself, but how unprepared a lot of parents are for co-sleeping. If your baby will not settle on their own, if they are screaming and crying every time they're left in their own bassinet or in their own room, you're going to bring them in with you. If that's going to settle them and somebody's going to get some sleep, you're going to bring them into you. And what the NHS have done now is recognise that sometimes in extremis you actually have to do that, and it's better that you do it and have guidance for that about how to do it safely, rather than it be a last resort and you have no concept of what the best way to do it is. So things like not having big fluffy duvets around your baby and making sure that you're not drinking and smoking around them, because those are the really big risk factors when it comes to co-sleeping and sudden infant death. So on the NHS, there's loads of guidance now for safe co-sleeping, if that's what your family needs, to keep everybody sane.
Yeah, we did planned co-sleeping last night because she was being unsettled, and I thought, right, well, I'm making this decision. We're going to co-sleep tonight. And so I got the bed ready to do it safely. And I think one thing that we've all done, I certainly have, but no one really wants to talk about, is this idea of accidental co-sleeping, where you're holding your baby and settling them in bed, and you suddenly wake up an hour later and panic because you hadn't planned to fall asleep, and oh my God, have I, suffocated my child. And it's an absolute tragic fact that it does happen. Some babies have very tragically died that way, and it's just a sad reality that we all accidentally co-sleep at one point or another because we are so sleep deprived. So it's really great that the NHS has removed, is it fair to say they've removed the taboo, I hope?
I mean, they're certainly not recommending it, because sleeping on their own in their own space is always going to be safer. But they've recognised that sometimes it is necessary, and in doing so, remove that taboo. And if you, as somebody who is chronically exhausted, sleep deprived, and you think you are at risk of accidentally co-sleeping, then knowing that it's not a taboo, knowing that it's not bad to be close to your baby, you're more empowered to take the right steps to make sure it's as safe as it possibly can be.
Yeah, get the area safe first, and then whatever happens will be as safe as possible.
Rather than saying to yourself, I'm just going to rock them to sleep and then put them back in their bed. Be realistic. Recognise, Mum, you are exhausted. Let's just give yourself a break.
And if you do want to plan to co-sleep, if you want that to be your established way of sleeping, it's not a bad thing if you can do it safely and in a way that allows you both to get rest. All you're doing is minimising the amount of time that you're both awake during those wake periods. It means you're spending less time getting up, having a wee, getting your baby out of their crib, all of this business. If you are able to do so while you're co-sleeping, then it means you're going to get to sleep more quickly, if that's the right thing for your family. All right, that's it for this week's episode of the Science Baby Podcast.
Bottom line is, don't sweat the sleep and be kind to yourself. Every baby is different. And let us know what sleep has been like for you.
Join the chat on Instagram. Just search for The Science Baby.
See you next time.